Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome. If you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do here on my channel, I cover true crime cases. All of the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older. So if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. So today we're going to be doing my second video of Doe-cember. If you don't know what Doe-cember is, here on my channel during the month of December, I just cover cases of John and Jane Does. Some of those being identified, some of them still being unidentified many, many years later. This one being very, very young. It is a very young Jane Doe, given the nickname Christmas Doe due to her being found so close to the holiday. We're taking it back to 4 days before Christmas during the year of 1988 in Millwood, Georgia. Millwood is an unincorporated and census-designated place, or CDP, in Ware County, Georgia, which sits at the very bottom of the state. It is a very small community of people. I'm not entirely sure its population in 1988, but in 2020, its population was at 72. Definitely one of the smallest areas we have ever covered. On December 21st of 1988, a logging truck driver stopped his truck near a landfill off Georgia 82 near Duncan Bridge Road and Forks Road. An article published in 2015 on Jacksonville.com describes the area as the wild forest, punctuated by dirt roads and flat open fields. Cattle graze and buzzards and hawks sail overhead, eyeing the earth for their next meal. At times, the only sound is the wind flowing gently against overgrown grass and weeds. It's the kind of country where young kids go on long rambles chasing after dogs or sit and tell secrets. An area that in today's time is pretty much exactly the same as it was back then in the late 80s and probably long before. The trucker walked over to the woods nearby so he could relieve himself. He had been driving for quite a while when all of a sudden he spotted something that immediately caught his attention. This thing that caught his attention, it was a TV cabinet nailed shut with plywood. He kicks the TV cabinet over. It busts open. Inside of it was something else very strange, something that I think most of us would stare at for a second and then have to inspect more. Inside the TV cabinet was a black suitcase made of steel, and the steel suitcase was sealed up with cement. Cement was kind of just slapped across it, so I'm guessing in an attempt to prevent anyone from opening the suitcase. The suitcase was also wrapped up in duct tape and a plastic sheet. The man decided to open it though. He was determined. He wanted to see what was inside of it. He tears off the duct tape and plastic and pries the suitcase open. It wasn't easy at all. And inside was something he never expected to see, especially during such a joyous time of year. Inside the cement-covered steel suitcase was a gym bag. And inside of the gym bag was a brown baby blanket. And inside of the blanket was the body of a small child. The trucker realizes what he was looking at, and according to him, he just breaks down crying. After he collects himself, he makes his way to a phone to call authorities. The Ware County Sheriff's Office was put on the case, and one of the first people there at the scene was Sheriff Detective Arnie Heron Jr., who was haunted by this case for many years after his retirement and until the day that he died. The girl's body was badly decomposed. Based on the autopsy, she had been deceased in that suitcase for anywhere between a month to 2 months. Her cause of death was undetermined. They weren't sure exactly how she died, and still to this day are unsure her cause of death. They did state that it didn't seem like she had been stabbed or shot. She could have been strangled, but due to decomposition, they were not positive about that. They have stated that she could have possibly been put in the suitcase while still alive and died as a result of that, which of course is just heartbreaking to even think about. Then of course there is the theory, and this is a smaller theory in the case because she is declared a homicide victim, that she possibly accidentally died or died from natural causes, and possibly one of her parents or guardians just disposed of her remains so nothing would be pinned on them. We don't know. Without an actual cause of death, it's hard to fill in the blanks. This right here is a clay mold done of the victim by Marla Lawson. This girl was a Black female child, guessed to be between the ages of 3 to 4. She stood between 2 feet 8 inches tall and 3 feet 1 inches tall. She weighed about 23 to 27 pounds, which is definitely a little below average for a 3 to 4-year-old. Could she have possibly been a little malnourished? We don't know, even though they claim she seemed healthy while she would have been alive. A physical characteristic of hers was that she had a bit of a gap between some of her baby teeth. She had black curly hair that had been tied up in a ponytail with a rubber band around it. Colored bows were also found in her hair. No earrings were found with the remains, but it seemed her ears were pierced. Her right one, they know for sure, definitely had been pierced, but it was hard to tell if the left one was as well, just due to decomposition. I guess the left ear was more decomposed than the right one. Her eye color is unknown, but it's guessed to be brown. She was found wearing clothing other than a disposable diaper that she had on. She had on white thermal pajama pants, children's size 4, that had a maroon trim at the bottom of it. She also had on a white knit sweater with a reddish-orange pony emblem on it. From the picture of it, it doesn't look like Ralph Lauren polo. It most likely was some sort of off-brand imitating their logo. There were basically just no solid clues that pointed to who this little girl could be or who could have done such a thing to her. The first thing they were working on, though, was trying to identify her. Pictures of the clay mold bust of her and sketches of her were sent out to the public in the hope someone would come forward with some information to help the department piece together everything. Sheriff Detective Arnie Heron Jr. was very familiar with the community of Millwood. It is a community where most of the same individuals there at that time have lived there since they were born, and their parents lived there since they were born, and their grandparents lived there since they were born, and the tradition just kind of goes on, and they just don't move areas. When it comes to true crime cases, sometimes we talk about areas where everyone knew each other, and yes, this was one of those areas. Pretty much everyone who lived in that community knew each other, or at least knew the person's family name. Detective Heron went over all of the families in Millwood, and it didn't seem like this little girl had come from any of those families. And it didn't seem like any members of those families had any clue as to who she could be, or who would be evil enough to do what they did to her. He started thinking that she had possibly come from maybe a nearby town or even an area far away and then just dumped in rural Millwood, hoping no one would ever come across her lifeless body. He combed through thousands and thousands of missing persons reports to see if any of the children matched her description or the timelines matched up, but there was never a match. There was never really anyone who stuck out to him. Detective Heron, who retired in 1996, had children himself and then grandchildren, and he stated, "It gives you the feeling that you want to get out and choke somebody for doing something to the child. But then you don't know what the cause of death was, whether it was a natural cause or what. Not knowing that is what really got me more than anything." He does make a point in saying how her hair was made up and she had bows in it, that someone could have loved her in life and maybe she had been abducted. We just don't know. We don't know for sure if it was her parents or guardians or what the case was. As time went on in the case, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation also stepped in to help, and a GBI former artist would draw up a new sketch of what the little girl may have looked like while she was alive. It is a beautiful sketch showing a happy, lively little girl. This is one of the main sketches spread around today. Overall, information is very limited with this case, but there have been a few theories through the years. Some of them did get people's hopes up. For a period of time, some speculated that possibly this Jane Doe was 2-year-old Kimberly Janice Boyd, who vanished on April 3rd of 1987 from Waldoboro, South Carolina, with her mother Sarah Boyd and her mother's friend Linda McCord after they all attended a gospel concert together. Kimberly would have been 3 the year later in 1988. She was 3 feet 4 inches tall and weighed about 25 pounds at 2 years old. Millwood, Georgia is a little over 200 miles south of the area where Kimberly, her mother, and her mother's friend vanished from. but remains have turned up thousands and thousands of miles away from where the individual went missing, so they didn't rule her out immediately. But she was eventually ruled out. This Jane Doe is not Kimberly Janice Boyd. Another child ruled out as being Christmas Doe was Bonita Karen Sanders, who vanished from Atlantic City, New Jersey on September 14th of 1986 at just a year old. I did an entire video about Bonita's case where I worked with her sister for that video. I will have that link down below if you want to check that out, but she was another little girl ruled out as being Christmas Doe. There have also been a few others ruled out as being her as well. This includes 3-year-old Alicia Smiley, who vanished from Atlanta, Georgia in 1985, 1-year-old Vignette Trudy Teague, who vanished from Chicago, Illinois in 1983, 2-year-old Sherry Nicole Barnes, who vanished from St. Louis, Missouri in 1986, 10-month-old Elisa Williams, who vanished from Ann Arbor, Michigan in 1982, and 5-year-old Ara Denise Johnson, who vanished from Big Sandy, Texas in 1986. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Dale Wiley told Jacksonville.com that really the last thing in this case that sparked interest was that they suspected she may have come from Albany, Georgia. They suspected this because supposedly a copy of the Albany Herald newspaper was found close to the TV cabinet. But of course she was found in a landfill, so could just be a coincidence. In 2009, they worked with a news station in Albany and ran a story about the little girl, hoping some more information from that area would come into the department, but nothing seemed promising. No one in that area seemed to know her identity either. A year after that, in 2010, an anonymous tip came into the Georgia Bureau of Investigation website saying that the girl's name could have been Bridget and that her family may have once lived in the Tifton, Georgia area, which is about 52 miles west of Millwood. I'm guessing that this didn't go anywhere because that is pretty much all of the information regarding that. Nothing else was ever really released to the public when it came to that theory. The most recent reconstruction photos done of Christmas Doe were done by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, showing her from pretty much every facial angle. This month, this case will be 34 years old, and unfortunately, they are really no closer to knowing her identity than day one. But of course, we do have to keep our fingers crossed, especially when it comes to things like genetic genealogy, which if you are new here, you don't know what genetic genealogy is, it's basically taking an unknown person's DNA and entering it into a genetic database in the hopes of getting a familial match. Her time for that could be very soon. But until then, anyone who has any information regarding this child's case is urged to contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST, which is 1-800-843-5678, or the Georgia Bureau of Investigation at 1-404-244-2600. Remember that you can stay anonymous. Now, in sad news, Detective Arnie Heron Jr., who worked so close to this case, did pass away in 2015, not long after doing his interview for Jacksonville.com. He was one of the main people working on this case. This case was so close to him for so many years, and it is really sad knowing that he spent so much of his time working on her case and never got to see a resolution to it. Dale Wiley, though, is still working on the case with GBI. In my personal opinion, and this is definitely a wide believed theory in this case, due to how young this girl was and no one coming forward with any promising information, it just seems like maybe whatever happened to her was done to her by a family member, somebody very, very close to her, like a parent. That would explain no missing persons report. If that truck driver didn't have to relieve himself at that exact time on the side of the road, chances are she would have never been found. Whoever did this, whether her death was done intentionally or not, in my book, is a monster. A monster who needs to face their punishment finally. This case needs justice, but that justice most likely won't happen until we know who she was, which I just hope happens soon. This is just one of those cases that when I first started looking into it, I was not expecting to be so sad and angry and then sad again while reading over all of the details. This is definitely a case that I've become quite passionate about in the small amount of time that I have known about it, and I will be reaching out to some people regarding genetic genealogy to see if possibly we can get the ball rolling on that, do some crowdfunding, because I would love to see this little girl identified and somebody face a punishment for doing this to her. But thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day to hear about the case of Christmas Doe, and I will keep you all updated if I find out anything else regarding genetic genealogy when it comes to it, and I will see you all in the next one.